Hi, I'm Attorney Ramsey Bahrawy, and this is Your Money, Your Life. In this segment, our topic is when roles reverse and we parent our parents. Joining me in this discussion is Jane Wolfe Waterman. She is one of the country's foremost experts in the trend of adult children taking care of their aging parents, or what is called parenting our parents. For the past 20 years, Ms. Wolfe Waterman has been a licensed psychotherapist. Before that, she worked as a practicing attorney. Ms. Wolfe Waterman combines her legal and social work training to provide extraordinarily insightful counsel and wise direction to people on all aspects of taking care of one's parents. Jane, welcome to Your Money, Your Life. It's great to have you on the program.
Well, I've been looking forward to talking with you, Ramsey. Thank you for sharing your audience.
And thank you for being here. Now, I know you have an interesting story to tell about how you learned that your parents were in distress and needed help. In fact, that story is the subject of your book, isn't it?
The learning and discovery of that is certainly the opening of the book.
Okay.
That it reflects many people's opening into this exciting and kind of challenging arena of parenting our parents.
Would you share that story with our audience, please?
I'd love to. It began one Christmas time when I ventured from California back to New York City, where I grew up. And I'd been living out here for many years, and my parents lived in the apartment in New York where I had grown up. And in spite of, as you mentioned, my years of training in social work and psychotherapy and focusing on elderly people, in fact, I managed to kind of avoid looking at what was clearly going to be in front of me. My parents were at this point in their mid-80s, and I was living far away. I was an only child, and I really don't think I considered, because I'm not sure I really wanted to, what was going to be ahead, because what was ahead was going to be life-changing. Because people have gotten sick, people have neglected to get their bills paid on time, people have forgotten to go to their doctor's appointments, and these are wonderful people whom we love, and we walk in, and all of a sudden, we're in the middle of an incredible crisis. That's what happened to me, and I see that story repeating over and over again, particularly during holidays, or things like Father's Day, Mother's Day, when people go to visit their parents.
So when you discovered that your parents were in distress and they
Yes.
needed help, was there any resistance on the part of either your father or mother? Were they concerned that perhaps you were interfering with their independence?
Very much so, and I think that my parents were born about 100 years ago, and people of their generation, and maybe some of the parents of your audience's generation, they're very private people and very independent people. So now that they're at the end of their journey of being so independent, it takes them by surprise and us by surprise when, in fact, people do need help.
It's clear that we all want to respect our parents' independence. And it seems to me that your story highlights, though, the importance of actually keeping an eye on mom and dad, and primarily for not only their safety, but also the children's peace of mind. So when you identified this distress,
Yes.
how did you approach your parents? How did you open up this subject in order to try to help them out?
Well, I really was sort of eased into it because the story that I tell is of meeting them for dinner in New York City. They wouldn't agree to let me take them out from their homes, so we went out to dinner, and then they kept putting off my returning and coming to see them the next day and the day after because they actually didn't want me in their home. And when I walked in for the first time in my life, my father looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here? I told you not to come here." But once I walked in the door, the state of their health and their apartment was so apparent that there really was not much protest they could do. There was dust, maybe an inch thick. And my mom had been a perfectionist homemaker,
Hmm.
and they were sick and they were coughing and they couldn't take care of themselves or each other. And so, whisking them off to the doctor in the hospital and getting some obvious need for instant cleaning help because, of course, they had pneumonia, which is such a common thing with our seniors in the cold at Christmas time. So their initial level of resistance was not even letting me in the house. But there are times and places when we parent people, Ramsey, that we just can't be polite. And when a 8-year-old wants to sit home and watch video games or not go to school all day long, we can't just say, well, that's okay with us. If it's not safe, if it's not healthy, if it's not the right thing, we have to look and see what is it that we might have a responsibility to do with people we love. Now, interestingly enough, Ramsey, some people's parents are not resistant. Some people's parents don't know how to talk to their middle-aged children
Mm.
and say, you know what? I need some help. These bills are piling up. My driving isn't so good. I'm having difficulty walking, or whatever it is that may be the beginning of it. And so what I'm finding with my book is there are a whole group of senior citizens who are very happy to find the way to the opening conversation, just as there are many people who are of the middle-aged generation. I call them pop parents. Parenting our parents is a whole way of life. And so I'm finding very interestingly, I hadn't expected this when I first put the book out recently, but I'm finding a lot of interest from people who really know they need some help.
After you visited your parents' apartment and you noticed that things were amiss, was it at that point that you actually made the decision to, quote, you parent your parents?
Well, I think it didn't exactly come on in that moment,
Okay.
but um, what I did next, because I live 3,000 miles away from where they were living, and because I worked in the geriatric field, was I enlisted a geriatric care manager. The woman that I interviewed and hired had a list of people who could clean the house or who could be ongoing caregivers, who could provide different skills and help that my parents needed. So the first thing I did was to try and get some practical help. But when I kind of caught my breath, I was looking at a choice. Do you wish to take on a role of being a parent? And I think it's something that each of us may take on as our parents age. Do you wish, are you capable? Is there anybody else? Can you take on this role of being a parent to your own parents? And what kind of commitment and responsibility might that turn into? And who is there to help you? Part of the purpose in writing the book, Ramsey, is to let a growing audience, including yours, of course, not have to go through some of the time, struggle, and denial that I went through, because one of the real benefits of your program is to show people that planning with estate planning, planning with wills, taxes, trusts, planning with practical matters does change your life and your money. And so it's a very consistent message that we have here by retreating from the denial that we don't want to think about. Many of us have just completed caring for our own children, and we're thinking it's time for us, time for retirement, time to slow down. Don't necessarily want to think about what's involved in beginning the process of caring for people who are perhaps going to be needing you for many, many years.
So as I said in my open, it's basically a reversal of roles, isn't it? If you decide
Yeah.
to become a parent your parents, you're now reversing those roles because your parents were parenting you when you were younger.
I think you really put your finger on it. And I think that what's being offered here is a new way to think about, a new way to act with regard to our aging loved ones. And uh, it's not merely helping. You know, helping is kind of, you do it for a neighbor, you take out the trash, you drive them to a doctor's appointment. That's helping. And it's not just or merely caregiving. It's kind of preparing meals, sometimes helping with toileting or dressing. But we're talking about something that is a responsibility, a commitment. It's a role reversal. It isn't for everyone. Um, I think it's very important to look at your relationship with your parents or your in-laws or your aunt, Frida, anybody you're thinking of doing this pop parenting for, and discover, are you willing to look at making a long time commitment and to being that person who's going to be reliable? What's so wonderful about pop parenting is the healing that can happen between parents and children, between the siblings who co-parent, who co-pop parent their parents together. But I think people really need to very carefully consider, are they capable and willing to make a commitment?
Jane, you mentioned in your book something that you call the pop cycle. Could you tell our audience what you mean by a pop cycle and why it's important?
The real meaning of pop cycle is it's a recognition that we are actually terming a new stage of life. It's the time of life when we get to increasingly care for people who are increasingly dependent, and we shift over how we care for them, how we make choices, and they perhaps cede some of the control and responsibility as they become less capable of perhaps doing many of the things they used to be able to do for themselves.
Jane, as an elder law attorney, one of the things that I oftentimes see are disagreements between siblings. It's not at all uncommon that siblings will not agree on how to parent the parent. Now, I know you're an only child, but do you have any suggestions or recommendations for siblings who are in conflict with regards to parenting their parents?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I also parented my mother-in-law, and I have brothers-in-law and so forth. So I've done both ends of that. But um, I think that what is often triggered as our parents begin to age and we start talking to siblings is some of the old challenges, sibling rivalries that came about very, very early in our lives. And the fact of the matter is, just as many of us are better parents to our parents in our 50s than we were parents to our children when we were only in our 20s. We are often more mature, more patient, more compassionate. We often don't sweat the small stuff that we did when we were younger. Similarly, as we get to be co-parents or look at how are we going to relate to our siblings with regard to this shared opportunity, which is also perhaps a shared responsibility, people who are in their middle age hopefully have gotten to be kind of grown-ups with each other. And I recommend that people find a way to sit down and begin to talk together. Now it's in the parents' best interest that middle-aged children cease acting like children and act like the pop parents and co-pop parents that they are, and sit down and figure it out. Who is the best person to manage the money? Perhaps there may be an accountant or a lawyer or a financial person in the family. That may be a better person to take on some of those tasks than the pop parent or co-pop parent or sibling, we may call them, who lives in the same geographical region with the parent, who may be able to be a better person to take the senior parent to doctor's meetings, particularly anybody who's got any medical background or is somebody who sort of naturally reads WebMD pages or other things like that. People often have inclinations. And if somebody is really good at persuading mom to do things, perhaps in the old days, mom's favorite child, maybe that person can take on some of the most challenging conversations with mom, such as, where are you going to continue to live? So I think that as people decide to accept this co-pop parenting notion, and hopefully take on a certain maturity that comes with the job, they either can figure out amongst themselves how to do this, and or they can get some help from a coach, much like a life coach. I think that we have also the technical means in the 21st century for people like you and I are talking at a great distance here across the country, people who have parents. My mother-in-law was in New York. One of the brothers was in Boston. We were out here in California. Somebody else was in New York. So we could get on Skype. We could talk to physicians on Skype. We could talk to people we would want to hire as caregivers. So you can all get together and figure out problem solving along with your parents, because many times, as I said earlier, our aging parents are quite capable of taking care of many things, and we're not pushing them aside. We want them to be as involved in the decision making as we can, so they too can often and do often participate in decision making, in coaching sessions, and in evaluating exactly what needs help, what doesn't need help. For some people, the pop cycle, Ramsey, may last 30 years. I mean, if your parents need some help and some guidance and some involvement when they're 65 and you're 45, or they're 70 and you're 50, and they live to be 95, that could be 25, 30 years. It's a harder job in many ways than parenting children. May last longer. They're adults and they can talk back to us, refuse to do what we say in ways that our children often can't. When they sometimes can't remember breakfast, they sometimes can remember embarrassing things that we did when we were 10. Rarely is everybody living in the same community anymore. And one of the hardest things, Ramsey, about pop parenting, in addition to being a little weird that you're doing this for your very own parents, is that at the geriatric part of the life cycle, the pop part of it, the pop cycle part, we really don't have norms. What is an 83-year-old person supposed to be like? Are they supposed to be able to manage their money, their doctor visits, their driving, cleaning their homes, babysitting for their grandchildren? Nobody knows exactly what the norm is, as contrasted with your 3-year-old child, where you know how tall they're supposed to be, how much they're supposed to weigh, what they're supposed to be able to do cognitively, how they're supposed to be socially interacting with their peers. And so not only are we in this really kind of odd space of taking on and doing some of the very things they used to do for us, developing and expanding our compassion as they used to have to do perhaps for us. But it may be harder, take longer, and we may lack a really good sense of what it is that's good pop parenting. So that's why I'm urging us all to be talking to each other.
Okay, now Jane, probably one of the more sensitive areas is talking to mom and dad about their legal, financial, or even spiritual affairs. And isn't it important for somebody who's parenting their parents to know that information? So how do you broach the subject? How do you open up that subject so as someone parenting a parent, you have access to that information and can make informed decisions?
It's a very good question. I'm certain it's one that you've grappled with, and you too may have reached some valuable conclusions in your years of expertise in your area. From my end, I find that the best way to go in at that is to tell your parents how concerned you are, because they still are your parents. And if you come in at them being angry or um, disappointed, it's a harder entree than if you say, I'm really worried. You need to help me out, mom and dad. Let's go to the doctor so I can figure out how I can help you. So sometimes there are immediate circumstances. Other times you may be home visiting your mom for Mother's Day or your dad for Father's Day, and you may take the opportunity to do something like open the refrigerator door and see what's in there. Is there stale food? Is there fresh food? Is there fruits and vegetables? Are they eating well? When did you last have a hot meal, mom and dad? Walk in and look in their medicine chests. Observe the state of their desks, and start asking some questions. And sometimes you may find that they can't wait for you to help them. You may find you have to be a little more intrusive. And other times there may just be a natural opening. For example, I just this past week lost an old friend of mine to her cancer. Now, if I were sitting visiting one of my parents, and I would say to them, just got some sad news about my friend Sue. You remember her? And we might have a conversation about that. That might be another way in. And you know, mom and dad, that makes me want to ask you, what do you have set up? I talked to my friend Sue's children, and she had a will and she had a trust. And so when she passed the other day, they knew exactly what to do. They called up Ramsey, and he had copies of everything. Sometimes they're really looking for us to come in, and sometimes there are even ways into a conversation that we can pick up on because we're going to want to figure out how to talk.
I think your approach is a subtle approach, and I like that. That works really well. Let me take this in another direction. One of the older adults' most common fears is that their children are going to abandon them by parking them in a nursing home. How do you get an elder or an older adult to get over that fear? How do you do that?
Well, that's another really good question. And as a therapist, I must say that the fear of abandonment is one that has plagued and does plague many people from literally the time they're born. And it's a very, very basic fear, and it relates to trust. I believe that, quote unquote, dumping people in nursing homes is something people occasionally do, just like people occasionally really kind of dump their kids in a school system and dump their kids in aftercare and dump their kids in a lot of places and don't really parent their children. But I think that in many instances, and I have one in my book, when people get to be of a certain age and they want to stay in their own homes, they don't have the insight that their own home may not be the best place for them. If there's going to be any kind of move into another place, I recommend that it be considered as early on as possible, because then the likelihood is the senior people can better interact and form friends.
Social interaction is critical. It's critical at any age, but I think it's even more critical when you get older, because otherwise you become isolated, and when you become isolated, that becomes a major issue. You know, I think that's a great place for us to stop.
Right.
If you're responsible for caring for an aging parent, you aren't alone. As a matter of fact, the issue of adult children caring for their aging parents is affecting more people than ever before. Not only is parenting a parent becoming more prevalent, but it also represents a vital and significant life-altering moment. In her book, Oh My God, We're Parenting Our Parents, How to Transform This Remarkable Challenge into a Journey of Love, Ms. Jane Wolfe Waterman provides unique insight and practical advice on topics including emotional issues, financial and legal problems, disagreements between siblings, and resistance among parents to accept care from their children. Although this book is a personal memoir, it explains how to be a compassionate, loving person as you parent your parents. It defines how to effectively adapt to the complex demands of this new role. It also addresses the extraordinary obstacles likely to be encountered. In addition, the book identifies the development and expansion of necessary new skills. Ms. Wolfe Waterman also describes negotiating what she calls the pop cycle. The pop cycle is that time in life when our parents are more and more dependent. Before you undertake parenting your parents, make sure you fully understand your role. For as Ben Franklin is quoted as saying, an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. A good place to start your research is by visiting parentingourparents.org. Also, don't forget to check out Ms. Wolfe Waterman's heartwarming book, Oh My God, We're Parenting Our Parents, How to Transform This Remarkable Challenge into a Journey of Love. This book will help you and your loved ones to thrive, not merely survive, during your family's pop cycle. In closing, I'd like to thank my guest, Jane Wolfe Waterman, author of Oh My God, We're Parenting Our Parents, How to Transform This Remarkable Challenge into a Journey of Love. Ms. Waterman, thank you for participating on this program. It was great to have you on.
My very great pleasure, and I hope people will go to the website. It's a resource for many, many people.
And as always, thank you to you, our viewers, for watching Your Money, Your Life. My name is Attorney Ramsey Bahrawy, building your trust.